All right, guys, welcome back to the Agent Investor Podcast, the only podcast out there that focuses specifically on helping real estate agents get off the real estate roller coaster by investing in real estate. If you're an agent and you've ever worried about when your next commission is coming in, investing in real estate will completely prevent that. When you have monthly passive income coming in every single month, you can actually be a better agent. You don't have to worry about when your next deal is coming in. You don't have to work with a client that you know you shouldn't be working with, and you can live a more safe and secure life. I'm your host, Tom Caffarella. For those of you who have never listened to a show before, I was a real estate agent. I'm a real estate broker now. I was on that real estate roller coaster, always worrying about when my next commission was going to come in until I started investing in real estate. Since I started investing in real estate, I've fixed and flipped over 1,200 homes. I have an over 300 unit rental property portfolio. I've raised over $10 million of private capital to fund my deals. And I have a real estate brokerage, Cameron Real Estate Group, with over 350 agents that specifically focuses on helping agents get off that real estate roller coaster. We're fortunate enough to have a really great guest today, John Bombaci, who was at our brokerage in the very beginning phases of his career, who was an agent, was an investor, now is a team leader with a ton of people on his team. But most importantly, and why you don't want to leave right now if you're thinking about, listening or tuning into another podcast, why you want to stick around to the end is John has overcome the biggest objection that I get from real estate agents as to why they can't invest today. And most agents know they should be investing in real estate. They know they don't have any sort of pension or any sort of retirement program. But what I get the most often is that even though I know I should invest in real estate, I'm going to wait because I don't have the capital yet to do so. And John has done some really impressive things. And every time I see him, do a post on Facebook or LinkedIn, it's always about these huge deals that he's being a part of. And now I know that John's not a billionaire just kind of throwing his cash down on the table. So I know that John has been out there raising money and really putting together win-win opportunities for people that he's working with in order to get under these deals to provide a benefit both for him and for his passive investors. So guys, stick around. If you're thinking in your head right now, I can't invest yet because I don't have the money, you're going to learn by the end of this episode how you can actually do that. So John, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Tom. A pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on because, I was kind of like a part of your journey at the very beginning phases of you getting started. And like I said, it's interesting because, I'm on social media all the time, and I always, look around and I'm always seeing you, do really great things. And I think I told you this, or I sent you a Facebook message on this, but this was like within the last few months that my mother-in-law sent me an article that you were in. She had no idea that I knew you or that you were connected. She's like, look at this guy doing all this development in Gardner, which is where she grew up. And I was like, I know that guy. And the funniest part about it was that she was like, wow, you know John? And I was like, yeah, I know John. So that's the kind of stuff that I've been seeing you do. But before we get to kind of where you're at now, I want to talk a little bit about like where you began. And, what you got your license, was it maybe 5 years ago, somewhere around that time?
2018 is when I got my license.
Yeah. So somewhere 5 years, we're in 2023 now. When you got your license, what was the motivating factor? Like, did you know you wanted to do a lot of investing? Did you want to be an agent? Like, what made you get your license on day one?
Yeah, so good question. So when I got my license, I still had my W-2 job. And actually, when I was working with you, I still had my W-2 job. I think you'd see me, crash around the office during weekdays with my laptop open, like, what the hell is this guy doing? Yeah. And it was a juggle there where I was doing the W-2 while learning real estate. I got my license because I owned about 30 units at the time, and the real estate agents I was working with knew nothing about investment properties. I thought it was odd that I was buying, 7-unit buildings, 12-unit buildings, And the person that I'm buying it with, like, maybe doesn't even own the house that they're living with. And I thought there was like a little bit of a disconnect. So I wanted to get my license so I could learn to be a better investor. And then throughout it all, kind of realized that there's this niche of, clients that want to work with agents that are investors, because it's a little bit more genuine in our experience. If someone owns a property and is helping you as an agent, they might not blow smoke when you walk a property and say, oh, the third floor tenant is awful. Someone that's been through an eviction process in the state of Massachusetts might be able to give you more guidance on how you're going to deal with that, or whether you should just, pack up and run. What I find is, like, when I'm walking open houses or talking to agents that don't know, is they give bad advice, not intentionally, not to try to, screw over their clients, like nothing like that. It's always genuine. But if you haven't lived through being a landlord, it's hard to give a newer investor advice on, like, how to deal with some of these problems that they've never dealt with before.
So I remember, like, shortly after I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad in like 2003, I wanted to buy a multifamily, and something told me, I don't know if it was a coaching program or a book or whatever, and they said, like, you need to find an agent who understands the investing business. And I remember, John, I'm not even exaggerating, I met somewhere between 10 and 15 agents looking. I would actually call like a Century 21 or a Coldwell Banker, and I'd say, hey, I'm looking for somebody who specializes in investing real estate. Not one of those people that I ended up talking or meeting with had the first even inkling about what investing was. And this is when I was a young 20s kid, and I knew more than them about investing. And I always found that to just be such a strange thing, because there's a lot of people who invest in real estate. And not to jump too far ahead, but you've like totally niched into that area where, like, you and your team you could call probably anybody on your team and they could probably do a much better job than any of those 10 or 15 agents that I talked to. And like you mentioned, they're not trying to hurt you in any way. They're not trying to give bad advice. It's strange to me that, like, a lot of them don't get educated on that at all. So when you started out, you wanted to become an agent because you had those experiences and stuff like that. Did you know that you were going to kind of niche that way in the beginning, or were you open to, like, regular retail type of business? Like, where was your mindset at back in, 2018 or 19?
Yeah. So, I honestly didn't know. I kind of talked to people about, like, hey, I want to work with investors, want to niche down. And everyone's kind of like, that's dumb. Don't do that. Like, stay open to everything. Like, the attorney I work with now is always like, why are you only working on multifamilies? Like, you're leaving the condos and the single families and everything else, at risk, because you're so focused on this small niche. And in my head, I was like, I don't think it's that small of a niche. Like, I think this is a pretty big business. Like, if I had 1% of the multifamily market in Massachusetts, I think I'd be doing all right. But early on, I was very opened up to everything, because the advice I was getting was, don't close yourself off to opportunities. And so, like, early on, I was any business. I was doing mailers, I was doing callers, I was doing anything I could do to find business, because that was the way you did real estate.
So what was the point where you decided that you wanted to niche, or that it made more sense to niche? Like, what year was it? How long were you in the business at that point?
So probably towards the end of 2019 is when I decided, like, screw everybody else. I think this is a big thing. I kind of went back and looked at my record and said, the times that I've gotten my butt kicked by other agents at listing appointments, or if I take a house on and I priced it wrong, were always single families and condos. Whenever it came to the multifamily properties, I always stood a fighting chance. I always got the second appointment. I always priced them right. I always had more success. And so I kind of looked at my track record and said, where am I winning and where am I losing? And I was winning on the multifamily side. And so why spend energy fighting something that I'm, why focus on my weakness when I can focus on my strength?
Yeah. And I think inherent in what you just said, which is something that, like, I think a lot of people make a mistake on, and I've made this mistake in my business, is like trying to offer a service where you're not really able to add a lot of value. And what you just kind of said to me is, like, you fought a standing chance with the multifamilies. And the reason why is obvious, whereas people knew you could help them. and you stood out, right? Because you actually could provide them with value. If they had a question, you probably didn't need to Google it or call somebody else. Not that you knew everything, but that you were more competent in that specific area. And that's one of like the major benefits of niching. And me and you talked about this. I mean, I reached out to you saying, hey, like I had a very similar experience with my brokerage, which was like, I was trying to be all things to all people. And it wasn't until like I niched down that like I was really able to provide more value to the smaller subsegment of people. But like exactly what you said, it's like, if you get a small piece of a big pie, that's pretty darn good. So now you have, I know you mentioned the number to me before we jumped on, but like how many team members do you have at this point?
So we have 30 agents on our team, about 30. It moved a little bit, but that's kind of the number at the moment. And then we have 15 people on our property management side.
And can you share with everybody what you share with me, like what the criteria is for somebody that's going to join your team or thinking about joining your team?
Yeah. So the only criteria that we have is you need to be an investor yourself or make a commitment to buy an investment property within 12 months of joining the team. And then you need to add to our culture. So like, you need to fit in, you need to get along with people. But I mean, that's it. Like I'm under the impression that I can take investors and train them to be agents. I've had a very poor success of taking agents and trying to train them to be investors. And so by focusing on the people that are already doing what I want to help people do, it's easy for me to teach them how to fill in contracts and talk to clients about stuff they already know. It's harder for me to take an agent and try to train them to do something that they've never done before. So
that's a very interesting comment. So why do you think that is? Like, why has it been easier? Because a lot of people, would probably look at as an investor like, well, it's going to be harder for you to be an agent. But what you just said is like you've had more success having somebody that's the investor mindset become an agent and be successful. Why do you think that is?
I mean, I think it's mindset is what I think it is. I think a lot of agents I talk to, I think you mentioned it very in the opening. A lot of the agents that we work with, a lot of agents we talk to, it's like they know they should be investing, they know they should be buying something, but there's always a reason not to do it. And all it is it's a limiting factor. It's a mindset thing. If I take someone that's already an investor, like they know how to invest. Like there's not many people out there that I talk to that don't think that they can learn how to be a real estate agent. Like, I mean, I was having lunch the other day and my waitress told me that she's a real estate agent, right? Like I'm sure you run into those things all the time.
That is such another interesting comment because I never thought about that. And that is a very weird thing to me because there is an extremely high fallout rate of agents, but yet everybody thinks that they can be an agent. And what's ironic about that too is that, like you just said, a lot of people think they can't invest. But yet at the same time, I've never seen too many people that like started investing in real estate that had a lot of like bad experiences. Like, I feel like almost like once you start investing, it's like, oh, of course I'm going to do this forever. Whereas like a lot of people who start becoming agents, a lot of them aren't there, a year or two or 3 years later. Yeah, I never thought about that. Yeah, everybody does think they can be an agent and it's still not an extremely easy business to like pull off.
It's not. No, it's like a huge failure rates, but everyone thinks they can be an agent. Like that's an easy mindset for people to get over. But like, yeah, but I mean, I just find that everyone thinks it's harder to be an investor than it actually is. You don't need as much money as you think. You don't need to buy the best property out of 1 million on the market. You just need to buy a good one. And if you make any mistakes, I mean, it, like time heals all wounds in real estate, right? Like you could make a really bad mistake, but if you give it enough time, you're probably going to turn out okay.
Hey everyone, this is Tom Caffarella. I want to quickly interrupt the podcast to number one, thank all of my loyal listeners of the Agent Investor podcast and tell you guys really quickly about an exciting event we have coming up. It's a 2-day event. It's called the Passive Income Real Estate Investor Event that you can find out more details at passiveincomeevent.com. We're going to be doing a 2-day training session teaching all of the agents and all of the investors at the event on how to achieve financial freedom through real estate. if you're like me and your goal is to not work 80, 100 hours a week, grinding, selling real estate, flipping homes, definitely check out this event. We're going to teach you how to build a passive income portfolio so that you can retire, so that you can work when you want, how you want, and ultimately achieve financial freedom. So again, go to passiveincomeevent.com for more details, and we look forward to seeing you at the upcoming event. And that's the other part that, like, I was talking to somebody else about this, and a lot of people will say, like, well, prices are high right now. And maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But you can guarantee that 10 years from now, they're going to say whatever you paid, it looks like you got it for a discount.
Yeah.
And that goes to the time piece that, like, it just that a lot of stuff with investing, it's like the odds and the way it's actually structured, it favors you because, hey, there's inflation. Well, guess what? Your rents are going up. Or, hey, there's, appreciation over the course of time, or you're paying down your loan or whatever it is. It's just that, like, a lot of the rules of the game just kind of are in your favor, even if you're not necessarily like the best. Like the average investor probably has a much higher net worth than a top 5% agent.
Yeah. No. And I heard this quote the other day, and it kind of stuck with me. Is like, corporate world, I was competing against the Ivy Leaguers, and I don't think I ever met anybody that was worth $1 million that didn't have a C in front of their name.
Yep.
In real estate, like, how many people do you meet every single week that have a net worth of over $1 million? Well, and they don't have to be that smart, or that they don't have to go to Ivy League schools. They don't need the education. Like, pick the hard. Would you rather fight against the Ivy Leaguers on the corporate ladder, or fight against the investors in real estate?
Well, to that point, I had another interesting conversation with somebody that we know, Walter Amarello. So he has, his mission. He wants to create 100 millionaires, and he has like a club. Like, once your net worth becomes $1 million, he gives you a trophy and you get recognized and all that. And I met somebody that was in his group that crossed the $1 million net worth mark. And I said, how does it feel? And she said, well, it's not even that impressive nowadays with real estate. And that like made me step back and go, only in real estate would somebody say that. Only in real estate. You would never say that in any other context except like, and the reason she said it, as you just said, is like, well, yeah, a lot of people do achieve that. So it isn't that impressive, but at the same time, it's still really
take that to any other industry, and it's like, it's insane.
Yeah, exactly. We talked about before we jumped on, like, or even in the beginning section of this, like, the biggest objection that agents give for why they can't invest is that they don't have money. And we talked about the fact that unless you're worth $50 million, you probably don't have enough money, to just buy anything you want. So at some point, no matter where you are, if you want to do big things on the investing side, you need to learn how to structure deals to raise money. And you've done that very well. I guess before we talk about what you've done, what would you say to somebody that says, like, I don't have any money, I cannot start now, like, I'm going to start a year from now or 2 years from now?
I mean, I guess it's not going to get any easier, right? Like, you're always going to have a reason to push it out. So normally it's like, how much money do you think you need? And normally they come up with a number that doesn't make any sense. And it's like, well, if you're willing to do a little bit of hard work and live in the property, you could buy $1 million property anywhere, and all you need is $35,000 if you structure it right and you have a credit score above a 680. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's not that hard to get started if you just pick the easiest way to get started, which is using, low down payment loans, government sponsored loans to buy a 4-family anywhere in the United States. And so most of the time when I have that conversation with people that don't think they have the money, like, they didn't do the math, or they're living in a single family house and they don't want to give that up, and that's fine. But now the question isn't, I can't get started because I don't have the money. The answer is, I don't want to get started that way. And so then it's like, okay, so now you got to pick the way you want to get started, but anyone can get started. because like you can buy a multifamily for far less money and have far less credentials than trying to buy a condo or a single family in a lot of the markets we deal with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, there is always some sacrifice to have gain, right? And you don't have to, house hack or, live in a 4-family or whatever to get started. But then you've got to say, okay, you get to sacrifice, some other way. So how have you been able to raise capital? How have you been able to really, I don't even want to say the word raise capital, but really just create win-win scenarios so that like you can be out there hunting, finding deals, putting them together, getting pieces of it, but it also makes sense for other people. Like, because I think when a lot of people think about raising capital or like putting these type of deals together, they think in their head, like, I'm going to call down my phone book and beg people for money, and it's not going to be a win for the other person. So what would you say to that?
It's got to be a win for the other person. So I won't buy a property that we're not willing to put some of our own capital at risk at, right? So part of us is, if we're not willing to put our own capital at risk, then why am I going to try to convince someone else to put capital at risk? And so everything that we do, we plan to put some of our own money into it. But early on, what I learned how to do is like, you're not raising capital, you're partnering with people.
Yep.
And it's just you're bringing something to the table. If you're bringing the deal and they're bringing the money, like that's a partnership, but it needs to be an equal partnership. Everyone needs to win for a partnership to survive. If you stand up partnerships and you're setting it up so someone's losing, how many times do you think you're going to be able to recreate deals with that person?
Mm-hmm.
But if you set it up so everybody wins, that person's going to come back to the table every time you have another opportunity to create a partnership.
But I think this is another point that a lot of people miss, and I'm curious what you would say about this. Is like, I think people don't understand that it can be a win for somebody just to put in the money.
Absolutely.
So what is it? I think the biggest thing I hear from people is, well, why don't they just do it themselves? Like they have the money, they could do it themselves. Like, so why would it be better to partner with somebody like you, or like some case studies of people that it just makes a lot more sense just to be the money person?
I mean, real estate is hard. Anyone that disagrees with that hasn't been investing in real estate. Like real estate's hard. Buying the property, doing due diligence, managing the property. It's hard work all the way through. And I mean, the fact of the matter is, the person that's making $250,000 in downtown Boston probably doesn't want to be taking tenant phone calls on a Saturday. Even if you hire the best property manager in the world, it's not passive, right? It's not, it turns out pretty quickly that when you have a good third-party property manager, like they're not going to treat the property the way that you want. And so a lot of times on our side, it's like, we source the deal, we find the deal, we finance the deal, we set up everything in terms of the relationships. All the person is doing is bringing the capital, getting the exposure to real estate, and then they benefit from the return. And so we just try to make it easy for them, where their only responsibility is bringing in the capital. Everything else is being handled somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think this is my biggest frustration for any listeners that have heard me. Like, you guys know, I got started by reading the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. I love that book. I think I can't thank Robert Kiyosaki for putting that book together enough. But one critique I have of the book that I don't love is, you read a book like that, and it's not just his book, and the philosophy is like, hey, you buy a property, you hire a great property manager, and then all of a sudden he's completely passive. And it's just not even close to that. And that's where I think maybe related to people feeling like, hey, what is the value for somebody putting in money? It's that these things aren't passive, right? They're businesses that need to be run like businesses. You could have a great property manager, but you're still dealing with a lot of stuff. And so, like you kind of mentioned, you gave one example of a person, and there's a lot of different, you could call them like avatars of people who it really doesn't make sense for them to be the active person. The person who's working in downtown Boston, I mean, you could throw out, a job. Maybe they're an attorney and they're looking to make partner at their firm. And when they become a partner, maybe they make $1 million a year. It's not worth that person's time. They know they should invest in real estate, but it's not worth their time because they need to spend all of their working hours focusing on making partner. And that's one of kind of like a million different avatars I can think of. Another one is just like, at some point in your life, you get a little bit older, you got money on the sideline, and you don't want to grind anymore. And you want your money to work for you. And somebody like John and his team, they're active. They're in it every day, and they're dealing with kind of the headaches of things that really, at the end of the day, if anybody's listening to this, if you had 100 million, how many people do you know that have $100 million in net worth that aren't really investing passively? Because once your net worth is up that high, I mean, unless you're insane, you're still, you'd have to be crazy to want to be completely active at that kind of net worth. So that's when, it makes a lot of sense. And I could keep giving more and more examples of these different type of case studies, but yeah, like John mentioned, it's not a completely passive thing. And that's where I think if you're trying to put deals together, you have to get in the mindset of like, you are doing all the heavy lifting and that person is just putting capital in.
And honestly, a lot of our investors are people who sold their investment properties, where they know how hard it actually is, right? They rode the wave up and low. They bought in at the right price and they sold it for $600,000. They know they should reinvest in real estate, but they've already put in the time. They've already got 10 years as a landlord. Like, they would much rather have someone else deal with that.
So there's obviously, we can understand this from a philosophical perspective. And I think that if somebody's listening to this, they would understand why that could work, why it could be like a win-win. But of course, then there's always the part of like, how do you find these people? Like, what do you do? And I know you have mechanisms in place in order to do your best to get in front of people that are thinking about investing in real estate. Could you share something with like the audience as to like how you're even getting these people to know who you are and know that you do have a solution for them?
Yeah. So, I mean, the easiest thing is, the brokerage side helps. So a lot of our investors are, the parents or family members of people that we helped buy their first investment property. And they have a good experience with us. They talk about it. Family gets excited when they see other people excited too. And so that's a good mechanism for us where, by successfully helping people buy multifamily properties, it naturally opens us up to their sphere. And then we host free meetups every single month. I know you host meetups as well. It's a great way to get people together. And we, they're free. People come. We normally bring in a guest speaker just to kind of, share content. And then as part of that is, we get everyone's contact information and we stay in touch with people as they join our lists. But I mean, that's kind of the extent of it. Is it's just, helping people buy real estate and then putting it out in the world that we're doing this in a way that people can easily find it. And all of a sudden you kind of very quickly weed out the people who are interested versus the people who, say they are interested, but aren't actually there yet.
Yeah. And I think another thing that people underestimate is that there is a pretty big need for this, because at the end of the day, there are people out there that have capital. And then you look at it, go, well, what are their options? And you go, okay, well, say you have, $200,000 that you could play with. Okay, option number one, they're putting in a CD and get no return. They're putting in the bank and they're losing, 5 to 10% per year through inflation. Okay, they could put it in the stock market. A lot of people don't want to be in this. I don't like the stock market. I don't want to be invested in a company that I don't even know how they operate. I don't know how they make money. I don't know who's running it or any of the risks to it. Or they can invest in a piece of real estate a lot of times in their backyard that they can understand and get a great rate of return typically. So there's a need for it out there. And, you said something else that I think is definitely true, which is like, you mentioned the word sphere, and people think of sphere, people that know, like, and trust them, their database, their real estate database, but they don't think of their sphere in terms of like how it could impact their investing. And most of the time, people who are going to become, passive investors with you, they have some sort of relationship or a connection to a connection or of some sort. And And a lot of agents, you guys already have that database. You're just not using it to for investment purposes, right? And I always say this to people, and every time I say it, I don't know if people are just humoring me or not, but like I always get a very positive response, which is like, if you reached out to everybody in your SOI and said, "Hey, I'm running a networking event. I'm running an event that teaches people how to invest in real estate. I know you bought something with me a few years ago. Would you have any interest in learning how to invest in real estate?" I mean, how many negative responses are you really going to get from a message like that compared to like almost like the tried and true method, which is like, "Hey, how you been?" Like,
You have any money?
yeah, yeah. And you do a really great job, with your meetups. And I haven't been to one. I want to go to one, but I'm assuming you speak at them, right?
I normally do the intro, and actually after this, I was going to ask you if you want to come guest speak up here in Lowell sometime this year. But I mean, the way we try to do it is like, it's adds value. Talk about a topic, answer questions. We have like a very strict like no solicitation policy. I don't even carry business cards myself. But again, it's all about building credibility of the team, building credibility of the speaker, and like and a lot of times it's a lot of times people can get turned off if we try to sell into that type of a crowd. But it's a good meetup from that standpoint, and it gets us the start of building the credibility for people to either want to work with us in the future or potentially invest with us in the future.
Yeah, and that's just something like I feel like this has changed so much, like as time has gone on, where it's like the selling is in the providing value. Maybe it's always been like that, but I feel like it has changed a little bit, even in like the last like 20 years, where it's like you provide as much value as you can, and you're getting the same result without even really having to say too much. And I mean, that's really truly, I mean, my whole, the agent investor brand, that's what that's all about, right? Like, I mean, we're providing 99% value, and there's a call to action every, 1% of the time. And it's the same thing with all of your clients related to investing. It's like, if you're trying to raise capital, there's going to be a need out there. If you're in front of them, they have a relationship with you. If you're educating them, you're helping them to achieve their goals. I mean, it's definitely a win-win. So what are some of your goals, like both with the team, both with the investing? Like, where do you want to go in the next few years?
So kind of both. So they kind of go hand in hand. The idea is we expand the team, the property management, and the investing into markets as we grow. And so we need about 150 units in a market before we can, kind of stand up the structure there. Right now we're in 3 states. We want to try to get to, 5 states in the next couple of years. I don't know what that looks like in terms of units or anything like that, but the idea is, as we grow to spread out into the markets that we want to be investing into, that we're just not ready yet. I only buy things that I can drive to. I only buy things that I have a team in place to manage, a team in place to find tenants and renters and contractors. And so the idea is like not to overextend and kind of bring the whole group together into new markets. And so that's kind of the plan, is just to slowly branch out to the point that we have a little bit more of a network to work off of.
So what would you say to an agent that's interested in investing, but they are worried about like closing themselves off by focusing on investing?
I mean, I would say, look, if you've worked with any investors before, look at where they are today versus where you are today, and see if, which path you want to be on. If you're killing it as a real estate agent, you have no worries about money or the future, then like you're probably in a good spot. If you work with some of these investors and you're like, holy shit, like I wish I bought that house that, with them. And it's like, well, you represented them on the purchase and you represented them on the sale. And so you could have. And when you start kind of looking at those relationships of, you as the agent essentially gave the investor the equity and everything that they have at this point. Like if you would rather be on that track, then don't worry about closing yourself off to the other side, because you kind of pick your track. And I promise you, like, even if you're working with investors, like people are still going to call you to list their single family houses. They're still going to call you to list your condo. Like you're going to have a good reputation, a good expertise. And you can quickly say like, yeah, I like multifamilies, but yeah, of course I can do a single family or a condo. It's not that big of a deal. And they're going to believe you as long as you are genuine about it and can kind of say like, honestly, I don't know downtown Boston all that well, but I have a buddy that knows this area. So I'll just call him and we'll work on it together. And it doesn't have to be anything more than that if you're open and honest about what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's the key with niching is like, there's the fear, you niche, and you're going to get rid of everything when it ends up like attracting a lot more of exactly what you want. But then you a lot of times still get a lot of the similar opportunities that are out there. Yeah, I totally agree with that, because if somebody is buying a multifamily or an investment deal with you and they really like you, and then they're going to list their single family, are they really going to try to meet somebody else? Probably not. I mean, maybe, but I doubt it. And you're going to get much more of the thing that you're focused on. But the other point that you made that I think is so important for anybody that's listening to this is like, find somebody who's where you want to be, get around them. But in addition to getting around them, just make sure that like what you're kind of like emulating is actually what you want. Right. So you did mention a good point, which I can't stress enough. I mean, the whole purpose of this, brand and show is to help agents invest, get off the real estate roller coaster. But if your idol is like a top producing agent that doesn't sell and they have everything you want in the life that you want, then you don't need to invest. Like it's not something you need to do. But I would say like find out who that, maybe idol is a bad word, but just somebody that you look up to that has the life you want, has the business you want, and try to just see kind of what they're doing, follow in their footsteps, and whatever that is. Anything that anybody else has done is possible pretty much by anybody, as long as you're willing to kind of follow, what they're doing and work hard and sacrifice.
And the cool thing about real estate investing is, I mean, I've never met, someone in the field that isn't successful, that isn't willing to share lessons learned or mistakes learned. Like this is one of those weird industries where like investors are looking to help the young guy because they kind of feel like, they're probably not going to do it. So I might as well just give them the trades to the secret, because like, I wish someone did that to me when I was younger. And like, the trick is like, if they have asked people when they were coming up, they probably would have gotten the same help. Is like, this industry is a little bit weird that like, the experienced guys are always willing to offer free advice because like it's an odd industry in that way.
It definitely is. And it's become even more so like in the last 7 or 8 years because of how accessible everybody is. And this is one of like the great things about like technology and YouTube and Facebook and all these other platforms. Is like when I first started in like 03, 04, 05, it was like, you had to come to like a 2-day seminar or sign up for coaching, or maybe you read a book, but you can never reach out to the guy who actually wrote the book, the guy or girl who wrote the book. Now it's like everybody's accessible. I mean, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people are easily accessible through social media. A lot of people, like us, we run the Facebook group for free, which if you're not in the Facebook group, make sure you join it. It's completely free to join. You can join at www.agentinvestor.com. But there's so much great content out there for free, and so many people that are willing to help without necessarily always asking for something in return. But I know, again, like we've both done that, and we've both grown our businesses by doing that. And that's the other thing is like, by definition, you grow your business by helping other people. And yeah, not everyone is going to want to work with you for whatever reason, but a lot of times they do.
Yeah, no. And I mean, yeah, the amount of times that someone says, oh no, I don't want to talk to you, I forget about, but like most of the time, everyone I talk to is more than willing to sit down for a cup of coffee or lunch and tell you everything they've ever experienced, because like, it's kind of fun to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for coming on today. Just another like example of somebody who really, is exactly the agent investor model, a little bit different of a model than I have, but nonetheless, like definition of an agent investor, killing it. Like I said, when my mother-in-law is reaching out to me saying, hey, like it'd be really cool if you knew this guy. That's when I think that you've made it. So thank you for sharing, and I'm sure everybody on here got a lot of insight. It's good to catch up with you, and reach out to me about the Lowell thing. And I'd love to do it. I'm definitely always out there looking for more speaking opportunities, so we can talk about that offline. And guys, we'll be back again next week with another agent investor show, another great guest. I do want to remind all of you guys, in addition to joining the Facebook group, make sure if you haven't registered already, please register for our upcoming 2-day agent investor event. You can do that at www.agentinvestorevent.com. It's a 2-day event. We always have them. They're always free. They're at a hotel. We even buy you food. But more importantly than getting the food is the advice and the learning that you're going to get and the networking opportunities that you're going to get. But I do encourage you to register now. The hotel that we just signed up for can only hold 250 people, which sounds like a lot, but when you're teaching on investing and it's free and you're going to get some free food, you'll be surprised at how fast that thing fills up. So I do encourage you, if you're the least bit interested, to register now, www.agentinvestorevent.com. Once we hit the 250 mark, unfortunately, the hotel, we just can't fit any more people. So we'll be back again. And I encourage all of you guys, not just to sell real estate, but to invest in real estate. Sales will make you a living. Investing will make you wealthy. And we'll see you guys again next week. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks again for listening to the Agent Investor Podcast. And especially thank you for sharing the show with other agents and reviewing the show on iTunes. Every time you share the show and leave a review, you are potentially changing someone's life. To get free weekly education, strategies, and to connect with other agent investors across the country, join our free Facebook group at agentinvestor.com. Again, that's agentinvestor.com.